Selena Bram had spent 18 months negotiating the Meridian Tower acquisition. Her reputation as the youngest senior director at Castellan Properties depended on tonight's signing ceremony. The rooftop venue glittered with the city's elite, crystal glasses catching the amber glow of 1,000 candles reflected against floor-to-ceiling windows. And somewhere in this celebration, her fiancé Damien was supposed to be charming the board members who would vote on her promotion to partner. Instead, she found him with his tongue down her business rival's throat behind the champagne fountain. The wine glass in Selena's hand trembled. Victoria Chin, the woman who'd been undermining Selena's deals for 2 years, had her perfectly manicured hands pressed against Damien's chest, exactly where Selena's had been this morning when he'd whispered that tonight would make them untouchable. The engagement ring on Selena's finger felt like a shackle. "You son of a bitch." Her voice cut through the ambient music, cold and precise as a scalpel. Damien jerked back, Victoria's lipstick smeared across his mouth like a brand. Victoria didn't even flinch. She simply smiled, that calculating smile she wore in boardroom battles. "Selena, this isn't," Damien started, which was impressively stupid considering his hand was still on Victoria's waist. "How long?" Selena's fingers tightened on the wine glass until she thought it might shatter. Years of controlling negotiations kept her voice level even as rage and humiliation burned through her chest. "How long have you been sleeping with her?" Victoria laughed, a sharp crystalline sound. "Since you were too busy closing the Riverside deal to notice, darling." 3 months. He came to me the night you chose that property tour over his birthday dinner. 3 months. She'd been planning their wedding, selecting venues and arguing with florists, while he'd been with the one woman who'd made Selena's professional life hell. The celebration around them seemed obscene. Soft jazz playing while her carefully constructed world collapsed between the past hors d'oeuvres and the imported wine. Damien reached for her and Selena stepped back sharply, colliding with something solid and immovable. Hands caught her shoulders, large, warm, steadying, and she breathed in something that didn't belong at a corporate celebration. Pine and smoke and winter air, wild and dark and impossibly out of place among the champagne and cologne. "Careful." A voice rolled through her like distant thunder, deep and commanding. "That's a 2015 Barolo you're about to spill. Waste of a good wine on worthless company." Selena turned and found herself staring at a chest in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. She lifted her gaze past broad shoulders, past a jaw that looked carved from stone, to eyes that stole the breath from her lungs. They were silver. Not gray, true silver, like moonlight on steel, set in a face of devastating masculine beauty marred by a scar that traced from his left eyebrow through his temple and disappeared into long, dark hair pulled back in a way that should have looked too informal for the venue but instead made him look like he'd stepped out of another world entirely. He was looking at Damien and Victoria with the kind of contempt usually reserved for something rotting. Around them, the crowd had gone unnaturally quiet. People were stepping back, creating space like this man radiated something dangerous. Several guests had actually turned pale. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Damien demanded, trying to salvage some authority, but his voice cracked. "Someone who values loyalty more than you value anything, apparently." The stranger's hand remained on Selena's shoulder, his touch somehow both gentle and possessive. "This venue belongs to associates of mine. I don't appreciate mediocre men making spectacles at respectable gatherings." The way he said associates made Damien's face drain of color. Selena noticed men in dark suits positioned at every exit. Not obviously, but deliberately. The kind of security that moved like predators. "Eric Kale," someone whispered, and the name moved through the crowd like a ripple of fear. Selena knew that name. Everyone in real estate knew that name, though always spoken in back offices and private conversations. The man who controlled half the city's premium properties through shadow corporations. The investor who could make or break developments with a single word. The one the mayor invited to private dinners and the district attorney refused to investigate. She'd just backed into the most dangerous man in the city, like a clumsy fool. The wine was making her head swim. Or maybe it was shock. But standing there, with her cheating fiancé and her smirking rival watching, with this dangerous stranger's hand still warm on her shoulder, Selena made the most reckless decision of her entire carefully planned life. She turned in his grip, tilting her head back to meet those impossible silver eyes. "I need a favor." The words came out steadier than she felt, her body buzzing with wine and devastation. She'd been stress drinking since the signing, celebrating what she'd thought was the beginning of everything. "Kiss me. I want to make him jealous." The entire rooftop seemed to hold its breath. Eric Cale's expression barely changed, but something flickered in those metallic eyes. Up close, she could see they weren't just silver. They caught the light strangely, almost seeming to glow. "You've been drinking," he observed, his voice low and surprisingly gentle for someone who'd made Damien look ready to bolt. "I've been celebrating my engagement to a cheating bastard," Selena corrected, swaying slightly. "But yes, also drinking. Half a bottle of that Barolo you just mentioned, actually. It pairs well with public humiliation." She gestured vaguely at Damien. "Please. I refuse to be the pathetic one at my own victory party." She could feel every eye on them, could feel Victoria's shock radiating across the space. The entire celebration had abandoned any pretense of not watching. They were the center of a scandal that would fuel office gossip for months. Eric's hand moved from her shoulder to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with unexpected tenderness. His palm was warm, rough with calluses that didn't belong on a man in a $1,000 suit. "Do you have any idea who I am?" His voice dropped to something intimate, meant only for her. "A man who values loyalty," Selena quoted back at him, reckless with heartbreak and expensive wine, "and apparently someone everyone's terrified of. Which makes you perfect for destroying my cheating ex-fiancé's ego." Something dangerous flickered across his face. Interest, perhaps. Or hunger. His thumb traced her lower lip, and despite everything, the humiliation, the anger, the shock, Selena's breath caught. Up close, he smelled like winter forests and something darker. Smoke and iron and something wild she couldn't name. "This is a terrible idea," Eric murmured, but his eyes were already darkening, his head already lowering. "All my best ideas are terrible," Selena whispered. When his mouth touched hers, the world disappeared. The kiss started as theater. Selena was certain of that. Eric Cale was simply indulging a drunk woman's request, giving her a moment of power over the people who'd humiliated her. But somewhere between the first brush of his lips and the second heartbeat, it transformed into something else entirely. His mouth was warm and tasted like the aged whiskey she'd noticed on the bar, complex and burning and addictive. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head with commanding gentleness, and Selena forgot they had an audience. Forgot she'd only asked for a simple kiss. Forgot everything except the way his other hand had moved to the small of her back, pulling her against him with a possessiveness that should have terrified her, but instead sent heat racing through her veins. And beneath the taste of whiskey and want, beneath the shocking intensity of a stranger's kiss, something else stirred. A pull she couldn't name, primal and inevitable, like recognition without memory. Like coming home to a place she'd never been. Like fate disguised as reckless desperation. When Eric finally pulled back, his silver eyes had darkened to gunmetal, and Selena realized with crystal clarity that she hadn't just kissed a dangerous man to make her ex-fiancé jealous. She'd just kissed something that wasn't entirely human. And from the way he was looking at her, possessive, hungry, and utterly certain, he had absolutely no intention of letting her go. Eric didn't release her. Even as the crowd erupted in whispers, Even as Damien sputtered something incoherent behind them, his hand remained at the small of her back, keeping her pressed against him like she belonged there. "You taste like cherries and bad decisions," he murmured against her ear, and the rumble of his voice vibrated through her chest. "And something else. Something I've been searching for." Selena's pulse hammered. She should step back, reclaim some dignity, but her body refused to cooperate. The wine had lowered her inhibitions, yes, but this wasn't just alcohol making her knees weak. This was something else entirely, something primal coiling in her stomach, urging her closer to a man who radiated danger like other men wore cologne. "The game worked," she managed, her voice breathier than she'd intended. "He looks ready to murder someone. You can let me go now."
"No."
The single word was absolute, a command rather than a refusal. Eric's thumb traced slow circles on her lower back through the silk of her dress. "I don't think I can." Before she could process that statement, he was moving, guiding her through the crowd with a hand that somehow felt both gentle and unyielding. People scattered from their path like he was Moses parting the Red Sea. Selena caught a glimpse of Damien's furious face, Victoria's calculating expression, but they blurred past as Eric led her to the terrace edge, away from the crowd. The night air hit her like a slap, cool against her overheated skin. The city sprawled below them, lights glittering like scattered diamonds. "What are you doing?" Selena tried to pull away, but his grip tightened fractionally. "Keeping you from making another reckless decision." Eric turned her to face him, his silver eyes catching the moonlight in a way that made her stomach flip. "Like going back in there and trying to salvage your dignity with more wine and worse choices." "I don't need you to. You asked me to help you." His voice dropped lower, almost a growl. "So I'm helping. But understand this, Selena Bram, I don't do half measures. You wanted to make him jealous? Consider it done. But now you're going to stay exactly where I can see you." The possessiveness in his tone should have infuriated her, should have sent her running. Instead, it sent heat pooling in dangerous places.
"Why?"
The question escaped before she could stop it. "You don't know me. I'm just some drunk woman who asked a favor." Eric's hand moved to her throat, not threatening, but intimate, his thumb resting against her racing pulse. "You're not just anything." His eyes seemed to glow brighter, and Selena's breath caught. "From the moment you touched me, I knew. Your scent." He inhaled deeply, his pupils dilating. "Jasmine and thunderstorms and something that calls to everything I am." "That's insane," she whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. "Yes." His smile was predatory, all sharp edges and dark promise. "But you feel it too, don't you? This pull. Like gravity. Like fate."
She did. God help her, she did.
Standing there with a stranger's hand on her throat, with the taste of him still on her lips, Selena felt more alive than she had in the 3 years she'd spent planning a safe, practical future with Damien. "I'm going to take you home," Eric said, and it wasn't a question. "And tomorrow you're going to have dinner with me. And the day after that, you're going to let me show you exactly what you've gotten yourself into. And if I refuse?" His smile widened, showing teeth. "You won't." Selena wore her armor the next evening, a black Armani suit that cost half a month's salary and made her feel invincible. She'd needed that feeling after spending the morning fielding calls from colleagues who'd witnessed her public meltdown. The dinner invitation from Eric had arrived at her office at noon, delivered by a man in a dark suit who'd simply placed the heavy cardstock on her desk and left without a word. The restaurant was called Apex, and Selena had been trying to get a reservation there for 2 years. It sat atop the Kale Tower, a building that dominated the skyline like a steel and glass monument to power. The elevator required a key card, which the silent attendant had provided with a deferential nod that felt more like a bow. Eric was waiting at a private table overlooking the city, and the sight of him in the low amber light made her stomach clench. He'd foregone the suit jacket, his white shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with what looked like tribal tattoos, intricate patterns that seemed to move in the candlelight. "You came," he said, standing with a predatory grace that made her heart stutter. "You didn't give me much choice." That invitation read more like a summons. Selena kept her voice steady despite the way his silver eyes tracked her movement as she sat. Because it was. He poured wine from a bottle she recognized, a vintage burgundy that cost more than her engagement ring had. "I don't ask, Selena. I claim what's mine. I'm not yours. Not yet." His smile was all dark promise. "But you will be." Before she could formulate a response, his phone buzzed. Eric glanced at it, and something dangerous crossed his face. "Your former fiancé is proving troublesome. He's been calling board members, claiming you sabotaged the Meridian deal, trying to destroy your reputation before you can destroy his." Ice flooded Selena's veins. "How do you know?" "I know everything that happens in my city." Eric's voice had dropped to something cold and absolute. He typed something on his phone with brutal efficiency. "Consider it handled." "What does that mean?" "It means Damian Reed's investment firm just lost its 3 largest clients. It means the bank will call his loans by Friday. It means by Monday, he'll be unemployable in any industry that matters." Eric set down his phone and met her eyes. "And it means Victoria Chen's company just discovered significant code violations in their Riverside project that will halt construction for 6 months minimum." Selena's mouth went dry. That's impossible. That kind of coordination would take weeks, dozens of calls." "It took 3 text messages." He leaned forward, his presence somehow filling the space between them. "This is who I am, Selena. When I want something destroyed, it crumbles. When I want something protected, nothing touches it. And you." His hand covered hers on the table, and heat shot up her arm. "You, I want protected."
"Why?"
Her voice came out shakier than she'd intended. "You don't even know me. I know your scent. I know the taste of you. I know the way you fit against me like you were made for it." His grip tightened. "And I know you felt the pull last night. That wasn't wine, Selena. That was recognition." Around them, she noticed the other diners, all men in expensive suits who kept glancing at their table with expressions of deference bordering on fear. The servers moved around Eric like he was royalty. No, not royalty. Something older. Something that demanded submission on an instinctual level. "What are you?" The question escaped as barely a whisper. Eric's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Someone who just made your enemies disappear with a phone call. Someone who owns half the city and controls the other half. Someone who's been waiting a very long time for you to stumble into my arms." He raised her hand to his lips, and his eyes flashed that impossible silver. "And someone who will show you exactly what you've become part of when you're ready to see the truth." Selena lasted 3 days before she broke into Eric's penthouse. It wasn't breaking in, technically. The key card he'd given her at dinner worked perfectly. But arriving uninvited at 2 in the morning, fueled by insomnia and the kind of curiosity that had always gotten her into trouble, felt like a violation of whatever twisted game they were playing. The penthouse was dark except for moonlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. She moved through the space, her heels silent on marble floors, following an instinct she couldn't name toward double doors at the far end. She found him on the terrace. Eric stood at the railing, shirtless, his back to her, and Selena's breath stopped in her throat. His skin was marked with those same tribal patterns she'd seen on his forearms, but here they covered his shoulders, his spine, spreading across his back in intricate designs that seemed to pulse with their own light. Scars crisscrossed the tattoos, old wounds that should have killed him. "I was wondering when you'd come." His voice carried on the wind, without him turning. 3 days. Longer than I expected, given how badly you want answers. What are you? Selena demanded, her voice shakier than she'd like. And don't give me cryptic non-answers. I've spent 3 days watching my enemies crumble while you send cars to follow me everywhere. I deserve the truth. Eric turned, and his eyes glowed pure silver in the darkness. You deserve safety. The truth is dangerous. I don't care. You should. He moved toward her with that unnatural grace, closing the distance between them. Because once you know, there's no going back. No running. No pretending you're still fully human. Fully human? Her heart hammered. What is that? Eric's hand shot up, and Selena watched in frozen horror as his fingers elongated, bones cracking and reforming, until claws extended where his nails had been, sharp, curved, deadly. The tribal marks on his arm blazed with golden light. I am Eric Kale, Alpha King of the Shadow Veil Pack. His voice had dropped to something inhuman, resonant with power that made her bones vibrate. I rule over 12 territories and command the loyalty of 4,000 wolves. This scar, he touched the mark on his face, was given to me by the previous Alpha King when I challenged him for his cruelty. I was 19. I tore his throat out with my teeth. Selena stumbled backward, her mind fracturing. That's impossible. Werewolves aren't real. His claws retracted, bones snapping back into place. You're standing in the home of one. You kissed one 3 days ago. You've been dreaming about one every night since.
She had. God, she had.
Dreams of running through forests, of silver eyes in darkness, of teeth at her throat that felt like ecstasy instead of fear. I need to leave. Panic clawed up her chest. This is insane. You're insane.
Mean it.
The word was a growl. Eric was in front of her before she could blink, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness despite everything. The moment you touched me, the moment I tasted you, I knew. You're my mate, Selena. My destined one. The bond has already begun forming.
No.
Tears burned her eyes. I don't want this. I don't want. You feel it. His thumb brushed away a tear. The pull. The dreams. The way your body responds to mine even when your mind screams to run. That's the mate bond. And it doesn't break, Selena. It doesn't fade. You can't leave me because you're literally being woven into my soul. That's a prison. That's forever. His forehead touched hers. And I will spend every day proving it's also paradise. The attack came on a Tuesday in the parking garage beneath her office building. Selena had spent a week living in a surreal daze, going to work, pretending normalcy, while Eric's revelation burned through her mind like acid. He'd given her space, or what passed for space, when his security shadowed her every movement. She'd almost convinced herself she could process this rationally, could find a way to navigate a relationship with a werewolf king without losing herself completely. Then the elevator doors opened on P3, and 3 men stepped out of the shadows. They moved wrong. Too fluid, too predatory. The same unnatural grace Eric possessed, but twisted with malice. The largest one smiled, and his teeth were too sharp. Selena Bram. His voice carried an accent she couldn't place, something old and guttural. The human who thinks she can be Luna. You smell like him, but you're still just breakable flesh. Tara locked her joints. Her phone was in her purse, useless. The security detail was 2 levels up too far. Marcus Thorne sends his regards. The man continued, circling her like a wolf around wounded prey. The beta who should have been second. The wolf who'll rule Shadow Vale once we prove Eric's mate bond makes him weak. He lunged. Selena screamed, stumbling backward, but he was impossibly fast. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Black spots danced across her vision as her lungs burned for air. Then the garage exploded with sound. A roar. No, something beyond a roar. Something that vibrated in her chest and made the concrete tremble, echoed through the space. The hand around her throat released and she collapsed, gasping, as a massive shape crashed into her attacker with the force of a freight train. Through watering eyes, Selena saw the wolf. He was enormous, easily the size of a small car, with fur the color of storm clouds and eyes that blazed silver fire. Even in this monstrous form, she knew him, knew the way he moved, the intelligence burning behind those inhuman eyes. The fight was over in seconds. Brutal, savage, final. When the three attackers lay motionless, the great wolf turned to her, blood staining its muzzle, and something in Selena's chest cracked open. Not fear, recognition. The mate bond sang with rightness even as her rational mind screamed. The shift was horrifying and beautiful. Bones cracking, reforming, fur receding until Eric knelt before her, naked and splattered with blood, his chest heaving. Mine, he growled, pulling her against him. They touched what's mine. Footsteps thundered from the stairwell. More wolves, dozens of them, all human-shaped but radiating that same predatory energy. They dropped to one knee as a unit heads bowed. Alpha King, they said in unison. Eric stood, bringing Selena with him, one arm locked around her waist. Marcus Thorne has committed treason. He sent his wolves to kill my mate. His voice carried absolute authority. Selena Bram is Luna of Shadow Vale. My queen, my destined mate. Any who threaten her threaten me. Spread the word to every pack, every territory. She is under my protection, bound to my soul, and marked as mine. He tilted her face up and kissed her there in front of his assembled wolves, claiming, possessive, branding her with his authority. When he pulled back, his eyes held hers. No more running, Selena. You're Luna now. That means you're mine to protect. Forever. And surrounded by wolves who would die at his command, covered in the blood of her attackers, Selena finally stopped fighting the truth. She was his. The Alpha Court convened in a hall that shouldn't exist beneath the city, ancient stone and torchlight, a space carved from bedrock that predated the skyline above. Selena stood at Eric's right hand, wearing a dress the color of moonlight that his wolves had provided, and tried not to show the terror clawing up her spine. 200 wolves filled the chamber, their eyes tracking her every movement. At the center, Marcus Thorne knelt in silver chains, but his smile was triumphant. I invoke the right of challenge, Marcus called, his voice echoing off stone. The Alpha King has bound himself to a human, a weak, fragile thing who will bear him no heirs, who cannot protect herself, who makes him vulnerable. He looked directly at Selena. She is a liability. I challenge for the throne on grounds of compromised leadership. The assembled wolves erupted in growls and shouts. Eric's hand tightened on hers. This is pack law, Marcus continued. Combat to the death. If the Alpha King falls, his mate bond dies with him, and I claim Shadow Vale. Selena's blood turned to ice. She'd spent 2 weeks learning their world, but this, watching Eric forced into potentially fatal combat because of her, this was exactly what she'd feared. But something Marcus said nagged at her. Something about the timing, the precision of his words. Wait. Her voice cut through the chaos, surprisingly steady. Every eye turned to her. You said compromised leadership. That's not the traditional language for an alpha challenge. I've read the pack laws Eric gave me. Marcus's smile faltered. Semantics.
No.
Selena stepped forward, ignoring Eric's warning growl. Alpha challenges are issued for weakness, cowardice, or cruelty. Not compromised leadership. That's corporate language. Human language. Her mind raced, connecting pieces. You're not acting alone. Someone's coaching you. Someone who knows both worlds. She turned to the assembled court, Marcus Thorne has worked in security for Kale Enterprises for 8 years. He has access to human business networks, human lawyers. Her heart hammered, but her voice remained firm. I want to see his financial records for the past 6 months. Because I'm betting someone's been paying him to destabilize Eric's rule, and I know exactly who. This is ridiculous, Marcus started. Victoria Chin. Selena's words landed like bombs. My business rival. She lost everything when Eric protected me. She's been trying to find leverage against him ever since. She pulled out her phone, displaying screenshots she'd been gathering obsessively. These are wire transfers from a shell corporation she controls. $500,000 to an offshore account registered to M. Thorne. Payments started the week after Eric destroyed her company. The hall went silent. Eric moved beside her, his presence radiating deadly calm. You accepted human money to challenge your alpha, Eric said softly, and the temperature seemed to drop. You conspired with an outsider against your king. That's not just challenge, Marcus. That's treason. Marcus lunged, chains breaking like paper, his body already shifting mid-leap. But Selena had seen Eric move before. The Alpha King's transformation was liquid violence, and the fight ended before Marcus's wolf form fully materialized. When Eric shifted back, standing over Marcus's corpse, he looked at Selena with something like awe. My Luna, he said, loud enough for every wolf to hear, just saved her king with nothing but human cunning. He crossed to her, cupped her face. They called you weak. They called you a liability. But you just proved that strength comes in many forms. The court erupted in howls, not of challenge, but of acceptance. Selena had earned her crown. The mate bond completed itself on the first night of the full moon, in Eric's penthouse with the city spread below them like scattered stars. Selena had thought she understood desire before, the careful passion she'd shared with Damien, controlled and predictable. But this was something else entirely. The bond sang between them, a living thing that amplified every touch, every kiss, until she couldn't tell where she ended and Eric began. You're sure? He murmured against her throat, his control fraying at the edges. Silver light flickered in his eyes, the wolf close to the surface. Once we do this, the bond becomes permanent, unbreakable. You'll feel everything I feel. My wolf will be part of you forever. Selena pulled him closer, her answer written in the way her body arched against his. I'm sure. I choose this. I choose you. When they came together, the mate bond blazed to life between them, a golden thread that wrapped around her heart and pulled tight. She felt him in her mind, his fierce possessiveness and deeper love, his absolute certainty that she was his destiny. And beneath it all, the wolf's primal satisfaction, mine mate, forever. Hours later, wrapped in silk sheets with Eric's arm anchored around her waist, Selena traced the scar on his face. I never thanked you properly. For destroying Damien. For protecting me. He's not done yet, Eric said quietly. Men like him don't accept defeat. He'll try one more time. He was right. The attempt came 2 days later, during a board meeting at Castellan Properties. Damien had somehow obtained fabricated documents claiming Selena had committed insider trading, had used confidential information from his firm to close the Meridian deal. He'd brought lawyers, journalists, even a detective. The conference room fell silent as he laid out his evidence, triumphant and vindictive. She's a fraud, Damien announced. And I have proof. Selena felt the mate bond pulse with Eric's cold fury before he even entered the room. The Alpha King walked in like he owned the building, which, Selena realized with sudden clarity, he probably did. Every board member straightened instinctively, responding to the predator in their midst without understanding why. Damien Reed. Eric's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. I've been waiting for you to make this mistake. He placed a folder on the table. These are the real documents. The ones showing you've been embezzling from your own clients for 3 years. The ones the FBI will receive in approximately, he checked his watch, 6 minutes. Damien's face drained of color. You can't. I can. I have. And here's what happens next. Eric moved around the table with predatory grace. You'll be arrested before you leave this building. You'll lose everything. And you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that touching what's mine destroyed you. He stopped beside Selena, his hand possessive on her shoulder. My wife has immunity from your pathetic schemes. She's under protection you couldn't begin to understand. And if you ever speak her name again, what the FBI does to you will seem merciful compared to what I'll do. The wolf flashed in his eyes, just for a second, just enough for Damien to see, and the man stumbled backward with a choked sound of terror. Security escorted him out moments later, his lawyers scrambling to follow. That night, Selena stood on the terrace beside her mate, her king, watching the city lights. The mate bond hummed contentedly between them, golden and unbreakable. Forever, she whispered. Eric pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. Forever, my Luna. 5 years later, the city belonged to them in ways both public and hidden. Selena stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse, watching the skyline glitter under a full moon. The Kale Tower dominated the view, but now it was flanked by 3 other buildings bearing her mark, acquisitions she negotiated with the ruthless precision that had made her legendary in both the human business world and the supernatural one. Luna of Shadow Vale, CEO of Castellan Kale Enterprises. The woman who'd unified 12 fractious wolf territories through a combination of strategic brilliance and the absolute authority that came with being the Alpha King's mate. You're thinking too loud, Eric said from behind her, his arms sliding around her waist. He'd barely aged, wolves didn't, not the way humans did, but she'd changed. Stronger now, her human fragility tempered by the mate bond until she could hold her own in a room full of predators. Her hair was longer, threaded with a single streak of silver that had appeared the night the bond completed, a visible mark of their connection. I was thinking about that night, she admitted, leaning back against his chest. The gala. The champagne fountain. How I kissed a stranger because I was drunk and desperate and wanted revenge. Eric's laugh rumbled through her. You chose the most dangerous man in the room without knowing it. Terrible judgment, really. The best terrible judgment I ever made. She turned in his arms, studying the face she'd memorized 1,000 times. The scars she'd traced with her fingers and her lips, the silver eyes that still made her breath catch, the long dark hair he'd let her braid that morning before a meeting with the European Pax. Do you remember what you said? That I tasted like cherries and bad decisions. And something I'd been searching for. His hand cupped her face with the same gentleness he'd shown that first night, despite all the violence those hands were capable of. My destined mate, stumbling into my arms in a designer dress and 4-inch heels, demanding a revenge kiss. Selena smiled, pulling him toward the terrace where a bottle of wine waited, the same vintage they'd shared the night he'd revealed what he was. The pack mothers still tell that story to the young ones. The human who became Luna. The woman who saved her king with spreadsheets and wire transfers. They leave out the part where you broke into my penthouse at 2 a.m. That's the best part of the story. She poured wine into crystal glasses, the liquid catching moonlight. Although I prefer the ending. Eric raised his glass, his eyes holding hers with that same intensity that had terrified and thrilled her 5 years ago. We haven't reached the ending yet, my love. We have centuries ahead of us. The mate bond had slowed her aging, would give her a lifespan that matched his. Centuries of ruling together, of building an empire that spanned both worlds, of nights like this where they could be simply Eric and Selena instead of Alpha King and Luna. To reckless choices, Selena said, touching her glass to his. To fate disguised as desperation, Eric countered. They drank, and the wine tasted like that first night, complex and burning and perfect. Below them, the city sprawled in glittering submission. Above them, the full moon blessed their reign. And between them, the mate bond sang its eternal song, chosen, destined, forever. Eric set down his glass and pulled her close, his kiss tasting of wine and promises kept. When he lifted her into his arms, carrying her back inside with that predatory grace she'd never stopped craving, Selena laughed. The sound of a woman who'd gambled everything on a stranger's kiss and won a kingdom. I love you, she whispered against his mouth. Until the stars burn out, he promised. My Luna, my queen, my fate. And in the empire they'd built from one reckless, desperate, perfect kiss, the Alpha King and his mate celebrated the dangerous, beautiful life they'd claimed together.